Welcome to Generation Gap Podcast 2, a look in the wide world of sports as seen through the colorful eyes of our gang of six. Ranging in age from 25 to 70, our recliner-restrained family members love sports just like you. Together, we take you on a journey to sports heaven, discussing everything from the real to the nonsensical, knickers to smart socks, high tops to hokas. We're family, and like in any family, when we don't all bleed the same team colors, the talk can get personal. So here we go with podcast 2. Uncorked, unvarnished, unrestrained, unrepentant, unseemly, and utterly unlike anything you've ever experienced before. The generation gap. Let's meet the family. From oldest to youngest, we've got Bob, yours truly, John, Charlie, Bobby, Benny, and Nick. All right, let's dig in. NIL and transfer portal. Nigel Pack packed his bags and left Kansas State for a 2-year, $800,000 NIL package with Final Four bound Miami. The transfer portal and NIL money. Is this the new norm in college basketball? And if so, is it good for the college game? Bobby, what's your take?
Yeah, so it really seems like NIL and transfer portal has become somewhat connected. A lot of players are leaving, entering the transfer portal because of the NIL money that they're seeing. And you're getting a lot of schools that seem to be benefiting, from this more than others. I noticed a billionaire booster for the University of Miami has spent over $7 million for over 100 athletes for NIL. And you may have noticed both the Miami men's and women's basketball teams made it to the Elite Eight this year. And the men's team is in the Final Four. So it's pretty clear it's having an impact. It's really the Wild West at this point. Different teams are, as I said, benefiting differently. So you have some smaller schools, they'll get some transfers from a bigger school if they're not getting the minutes that they want. But a lot of the bigger schools are, really getting the best of this just because they have money from big boosters and things like that. So there really doesn't seem to be any rules. NCAA isn't policing it much. It's because it's so new. And so it's something that I'm concerned about. I think ultimately it's good for the student athletes to be able to move where they want and be able to, get some money as they play, but it's going to have some unintended consequences.
Hey, Nick, what do you think? Is this good for the game?
Well, I think you need to separate the NIL from the transfer portal. I think they both have different consequences. I think both are good for the student athletes, or maybe the college athletes, semi-professional athletes, however you want to call them at this point. This with the NIL, I don't think it has to. Obviously, you have some institutional effects, like Bobby noted with Miami. Though it's not the schools directly paying. I think the athletes be able to make money off their image and likeness is something that's long overdue. I don't know if it has direct impacts in the game. I think that'll tell itself with time. It could be said that these larger schools with more concentrated spots of money might be able to harbor talent more than the smaller schools, but look at the Final Four this year, it doesn't seem so obvious just yet. Otherwise, whereas before, athletes really just had facilities, coaches, other talent to join teams. Now that money's an option, maybe a smaller school might be able to throw that in the ring and make a compelling offer. In terms of the transfer portal, again, I think that might be a little too early to tell, but at this point, I want to say like 28% of athletes from the 2021 men's college basketball season switch teams, the transfer portal. So we're losing a lot of continuity, which has long been one of the main fabrics of college basketball. So in that way, I would say the transfer portal might be a bad thing for the sport itself. That said, I think both are good for the athletes.
I got to flip that on you, Nick. Transfer portal is kind of the great equalizer. I can see why kids want to go wherever they can to get an opportunity to play.
Mhm.
By the same token, NIL money, that really makes it, I think, less fair. A small number of kids really benefit with the money. Most don't get that much money. And the big picture is, I think it hurts the game. And if the game gets hurt, there'll be fewer opportunities for athletes in the future. Charlie, what do you think?
I think at the end of the day, it's all about the fans. After all, college basketball is a business, and the business is all about eyeballs, whether they're eyeballs that are in the seats or eyeballs that are watching on television. And I believe that the combination of NIL and the transfer portal are likely to diminish the game, both by reducing the parity, as schools who benefit from having some wealthy boosters who can attract players like Miami's done this last year, as there's probably a small number of schools who are in that position and therefore are able to become dominant over time. That in combination with a lot of players transferring out, kind of undercutting the loyalty that college hoops fans have come to, I think, enjoy and appreciate out of their teams. I think both those things are endangered. And whereas I agree with all of the short-term benefits that a decent number of college athletes are going to enjoy, at the end of the day, if the business of college basketball suffers because of reduced fan interest, that becomes a losing proposition for everybody. So I think the game stands to lose. I would say this year's Final Four, despite what Bobby pointed out about Miami, this year's Final Four seems to be undercutting my argument a bit. All right. The parity we're seeing this year in the tournament is really unprecedented. But my guess is we'll see it to be more and more of an anomaly over time, and that the schools with the big pocketed boosters are going to win out.
Bob, when you look at NIL and transfer portal, does it affect college basketball differently than it affects college football?
Probably, because college basketball involves a much smaller number of athletes. And with just a couple of big payouts, you can totally transform your team by landing a couple of good guys. Let me add here, I think there is likely to be a surprisingly democratic effect of the NIL money, because the well-heeled booster could come from any place. You know, every small school has got some wealthy boosters. If those people take an individual interest in the team, you could see a very low-ranked team suddenly soar to the top. If one billionaire changes the landscape, the locker room chemistry may well change. You are now going to have players being paid more than assistant coaches. You're going to have players in the locker room looking at each other. Some are wealthy, some are getting very little. The chemistry may change a lot. Players are going to be concerned about their minutes, their points, their individual goals, stuff that's going to help them market for next season. So there's likely to be a lot of turbulence and some negativity. I think fan perceptions could be corroded. The level of cynicism will spike. Fans will be much more willing and perhaps justified in seriously criticizing players who underperform based on the amount of money they're getting. The inborn sympathy that college basketball players normally get up till now is going to evaporate in many circumstances. So this is going to be a very different landscape. I don't know where it'll come down. I do agree that in a lot of ways, this is fairer for the athletes who have been the folks not benefiting financially from the existing system.
Northwestern University, the Ryan families pouring in hundreds and hundreds of $1 million into football stadium, athletic fields for what they call the Olympic sports there. The Ryan family decides, you know what, we just invested a whole lot in these wonderful buildings to build the credibility for Northwestern programs. At what point do they jump in with NIL and decide, you know what, in order to make this investment pay off, we got to get better players here in order to compete? Benny, what's your take?
So I'm going to have a little bit different take on this, though I agree with basically what pretty much everyone said about the competitiveness aspect. I'm also though looking at this from a little bit different perspective because I went to a D3 school. So I went to a school where guys were playing, college sports just to play college sports. They weren't going there on scholarships or anything else, at least at my university. But one thing when I see what's happening with the NCAA and the NIL money and the transfer portal, what I see is sort of the professionalization of college basketball. These are guys that clearly have financial value attached to their names, but they're not allowed to go pro and capitalize on that. Instead, the NCAA is holding them hostage, basically saying, no, you have to play at least 1 year here so we can profit off you. And yeah, we know that you're popular, so we're going to let you make money off your name, image, and likeness. But you're still not allowed to go to NBA or, some minor league basketball team in the US. And so to me, this is just not fair to athletes. I agree NIL money is better for college athletes than not having anything. And I think the transfer portal also reinforces this idea that this is not really college basketball. This is so much player movement that's like, it's like looking at transfers in professional soccer or whatever, where guys are bouncing from team to team, signing with different schools. It's not really what college basketball is about, I feel like, historically. And it's been moving this way for a while. Obviously, with the one and done situation, you have a lot of guys there going to play college basketball, not because they're there for academics, but they're there just to pursue basketball careers, and they're forced to be there because they can't go straight to the NBA. So I think this could potentially open the floodgates for further potential lawsuits where you have athletes getting together and they're like, you know what? If you don't create some type of minor league system or let us jump straight to the NBA, why are we being held hostage? Why are we being forced to do this where there's this collusion basically going on between the NCAA and the NBA to prevent players from taking that step when they're clearly capable of? You look at the history of players like Kevin Garnett, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant. So to me, it really bothers me because I think that college basketball can be super fun without holding players hostage. But I think the money is kind of, running the show right now. So
I understand the hostage perspective on that. On the other hand, if there are no hostages, eventually there's no college basketball because you can't keep the game together. So is that really in the best interest of long-term of the athletes and of fans to grant players so much flexibility to come and go as they please without loyalty to their schools? And at what point do they become a minor league system that fans really have no interest in?
I think that fans will still have interest in because you look at college hockey, for example, where you have guys that can go straight to the NHL and play in the minor leagues, or you can stay in college. I don't think it hurts the college game. It just makes it so the players that want to go pro can go pro right away. You can still have the rule that you can't go pro and come back to college. But I think that, before we were letting, LeBron James go straight to the NBA, but now we're not. It just doesn't make any sense. It seems to me that this is just about the NCAA trying to keep money and the NBA's in on it because they're allowing it where you have to, go at least 1 year in college. And I think that you also get college basketball players that will develop their game and still go pro, even if they're not required to be, there 1 year. So I don't think it really hurts college basketball so much. I think the one and dones hurt college basketball because you got all these guys. I looked at University of Kansas, how many years we have guys that just leave after 1 year. And it's like, okay, you don't even remember them afterwards. The memories that you make with college basketball players are the guys that stay there 4 years. And, they're the ones that you're retiring the jerseys of.
Charlie, you're a big fan of college sports. What's your take?
Well, just another perspective, speaking personally, and as a Badger fan, I'm gonna go outside of basketball for just a moment here. I think, the Badger football team just got a new coach, Luke Fickell, right? And I think we've got 13 new transfers to just join the team for this spring. And man, I got to tell you, the transfer portal seems like the best thing ever all of a sudden. All right. It's kind of interesting. As a Wisconsin fan, this doesn't seem like the normal position we're in to be the recipient of, all this interest in our program and all these high flying players coming in all of a sudden. The basketball team, it sort of feels like, although we don't know yet, it kind of feels like it might work against us. So I do think, with a lot of fans, it's probably going to depend on what team you root for and whether your team benefits or is hurt by both NIL and transfer portal. So right now I feel good about Badger football, but not so good about basketball.
Until Greg Gard lines up a couple hefty transfers to come in here, then maybe things look a little different.
It would look a lot different, but at the same time, and you and I have talked about this, we've got a freshman we're all excited about, Connor Sejan, right? Although he kind of trailed off here at the end of the season, but we've all shuddered with the possibility that somebody could swoop in, give him several $100,000, and boy, there goes the guy we're most excited about for the next 3 years. So it's we'll see. We might lose some key guys, or we might gain. We'll see.
Okay, Bob, you get the last word on this one.
Well, somebody made reference to Wild West. That's exactly where we are. Another consideration is that different states have already started regulating this in different ways. You're going to have laws that are all over the map, which guarantees some litigation, perhaps, at some point. The NCAA doesn't really know what to do. College athletic directors, college presidents don't really know what to do. This is wide open. The consequences are not all apparent yet. What is apparent is that because colleges and universities are not directly allowed to pay the players, this happens through third parties who are completely unregulated. It'll be interesting to see what happens when a number of athletes underperform in relation to the money they're getting. There are a lot of things that need to shake out.
It's true. This big worry, the pressure on a lot of athletes, some of it self-imposed. How is this going to work out when some of these kids don't live up to the hype? There'll be a lot of pressure either to perform or leave. A lot of pressure on coaches to make changes at that point too. And what does a kid do after they've made that one transfer, that one free move? They get the NIL money and it's not working out. What happens to those kids? Probably then with the 13 players that Charlie mentioned going to Wisconsin, some of those guys really can't transfer again until they're graduate students. And if they don't pan out at UW, they may have some issues there. So that'll be interesting to see. All right. Time to talk about refreshments. Let's do the Tell Me in Two segment. Charlie, we're going to kick off with you again. What's in your glass tonight?
Well, I do need a drink after that discussion. I'm going with Yingling beer. This is one of my go-tos. Can't buy it here in Wisconsin, but my neighbor Bruce, who winters in Florida, he always brings me a couple cases back. So I greatly appreciate it when he does that. I think it's the oldest brewery in the United States and just good old standby lager. So I love it.
Yep, that is a great local beer. That is super stuff. By the way, the brewery in Monroe, Wisconsin, now called Minhas, used to be called Huber, I believe is the second oldest active brewery in the United States after Yingling. All right, Bobby, I want to leave you on the lurch there. What you drinking tonight?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of scotch this evening. It is the Glenlivet single malt Scotch whiskey, 15-year. This is the French Oak Reserve edition. Stuff is bottled at the Glenlivet Distillery in Banffshire, Scotland. Very good.
Seems a little above your taste level to me, but
well, I mean, gotta celebrate a little bit. The Minnesota Golden Gopher hockey team going to the Frozen Four. So
interesting, Bobby. So you drink that on the rocks? You drink that neat?
I usually go with neat myself.
Very good. Congratulations to Gophers. Congratulations to the University of Wisconsin women for once again dominating the Frozen Four and taking home an unprecedented 7th national championship. Incredible. Okay, Benny, what you drink tonight?
So with me today, I'm actually drinking some red wine out of Cabernet Sauvignon. It's called Boggle is the company. It's out of California, and I think it's Clarksburg, California. I like it. You know, it's a pretty good wine. It's also not very expensive. So for those looking for wine on a budget, I think a bottle's $10. Gave some to my in-laws. They thought it was great. So, you know, if it fools a foreigner, then it'll probably fool you too. So.
All right.
Calling yourself
Bob,
out.
Bob Senior, what do you got drinking there?
Okay. I've got a bottle of Monterey beer brewed in Guatemala. It has kind of a light Mexican style taste, a little bit like Corona. Pleasant, pretty much goes with anything.
Nice. Out here in California, enjoying a little bit of, make sure the picture, that's Jefferson bourbon. Very nice, simple taste with a from scratch mixture of limes and orange juice to make a sour mix. It's sort of we'll call it a desert style whiskey sour, a bourbon sour. It's really quite tasty. All right. So Nick, you know, it's glad to see you're sitting upright. Can you share with us what you're drinking tonight?
Sure. With a Guinness Extra Stout. Found this at the back of my fridge. For Tuesday night might not be entirely appropriate, but I think for a podcast it works.
All right. Thank you. Let's talk about what's unique in the sports world. Bob, what's going on out there?
We wrapped up the World Baseball Classic late last week. It was, by all assessments, a great success because it drew intense interest. It had a perfectly scripted climax. The United States did not win. We lost to Japan 3-2 in a close game. The last at bat of the game was just what you would have scripted for a grade B movie. Shohei Ohtani, the Japanese superstar who plays the field, hits and pitches, came in relief to face Mike Trout, the American superstar. They're teammates, by the way, with the Angels. And Ohtani struck Trout out for the last at bat of the game and the championship. So the United States will have to settle for second place. Japan had a less formidable looking roster, but everybody had a role and they played it just right. So they won. One other note about the tournament. At the entry level, you might say, there are new teams making a splash. One interesting story involves the team from Great Britain. They were on a very tiny budget. Their coach, their manager, is actually unpaid. He was a baseball player at Dartmouth and got into the channel to move up the coaching chain in Great Britain simply by accident. He started out as a T-ball coach when nobody else among the parents would volunteer. Because he had actually played in college, he was the closest thing they had to a local expert in many circumstances. So he coached the national team in the World Baseball Classic this year, led them to their first ever win in the World Baseball Classic against Colombia. So that guarantees Britain does not have to qualify for the next World Baseball Classic in just 3 years. Historical note, this day in 1983, the Baltimore Colts skipped out of town in the middle of the night to become the Indianapolis Colts. And some of us weren't real happy about that.
Trivia question for you, Bob. Do you remember the name of the moving firm that pulled the...
I think it was Mayflower, wasn't it?
Mayflower.
I think
Very
so.
good. It was Mayflower.
Yeah.
They arrived after midnight. By 4 a.m., the Colts were packed up and gone.
That's right. That's right. In the snow. One other sports note on the obscure side. The NCAA Fencing Championships took place over the past weekend. And as you all know, fencing consists of 3 events: the foil, the epee, and the saber. The latter is the cut and slash. Each one has different rules. The national champion this year is Notre Dame. On the men's side, Luke Linder of Notre Dame became the national saber champion on the women's side. Esther Mohari of Notre Dame became the women's épée champion. Notre Dame was the only school to have a pair of national champions, except for Harvard, which won foil and épée. Harvard took third place behind Columbia. Behind Columbia and Princeton. Ohio State took fifth place. So a lot of different schools, it might surprise you, participate in fencing, but it gets, of course, very little attention. I will add, by the way, it's a legit sport. I tried for 1 week many years ago to work out with some fencers and learn the sport. I thought this would be a piece of cake. You got good reflexes. You're, fairly good condition aerobically. Should be no problem. It was painful and exhausting and totally humiliating.
How do you think the NIL and transfer portals impacting fencing?
Somebody with a little money could change the landscape. That's right. If I kick in $5, maybe Yale will rise to the top.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what happened this last couple of weeks with March Madness and the tournament. And I really appreciate Nick's perspective on this. If you look at Benny's bracket and the tournament setup there, and you look at the generation issue we're talking about here, the top 3 finishers out of the 6 of us were the 3 senior members. The bottom 3 finishers were the younger members. And the point difference was quite significant. And, Nick, you studied these things pretty closely. And I know you take these things, very dear to your heart. What happened to the younger group here when it came to forecasting what was going to happen with March Madness?
John, I think, this year we saw Fairleigh Dickinson beat Purdue. Years ago, we saw UMBC, Virginia. These things just happen, this is life.
So this is not a trend. It's not your lack of gut instinct or knowledge of the game.
It's what we all love about March Madness is that anything can happen.
It's just anything can happen.
Part of the game.
Part of the game. Okay, that's one way to dismiss it. Benny, do you have any a comment on that? You organized this.
Yeah, well, I didn't finish them last, so that's my first thing I would like to say and point out for the listeners. Someone else did in this group, but I will say that March Madness is kind of like being blindfolded and throwing darts at a dartboard. It really is just a total mess. Half the time people win these bracket challenges, never watch a game. My wife, for example, finished 3rd. She's never watched a college basketball game in her entire life. So it just shows you that it doesn't really mean much if you win a bracket challenge. In fact, I think probably historically, if you look at the people that win the actual official bracket challenge, most of them are not exactly like big basketball enthusiasts, because you kind of have to pick games that no one else would pick unless they didn't watch basketball in the first place to win, because March Madness, as Nick pointed out, is completely insane. So that's all I have to say about that.
Bobby, somebody has to finish last. And it didn't have to be you, but it was you. So how do you explain that?
Well, to be fair, I was tied for last with someone else. As far as the full rankings go. So I wasn't alone in that. It does remind me of the saying, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. So obviously, some of you folks, hit the lottery with some of your picks. My picks were very logical. It was, things that you would expect to happen. And then, the tournament will be the tournament. And you have these crazy things that can happen. And this year, was one of the wildest of all time. So yeah, that's fine. I'll take my lumps this year, and look forward to the college hockey weekend where I can enjoy a little bit of that.
Okay,
Charlie, who has the best record in the history of the tournament for a single tournament bracket?
Like what?
Oh, I'm sorry, not
individual-
Charlie. Ask Benny. I'm sorry. Yeah, Charlie, you wouldn't know. Yeah,
Right.
just with you.
You might know. You never know.
Yeah,
Like who had the best bracket ever?
yeah,
Well,
amongst us.
I mean, let's see here. I can check that in 5 seconds. The best bracket ever is you.
Yeah,
2021. You had 1430 in terms of points. So
it just is another piece of data that aligns with John's theory. So I wanted to back him up.
well, to be fair, Nick did win the very first bracket challenge in 2018 from my group. So score one for my generation there.
You know, and I think that really speaks to Bobby's point about a blind squirrel. It can't happen. Okay, on that note, Charlie, why don't you take us through the predictions and everything else that the winners and losers versus the spread, etc.
Last week?
Yeah.
Well, I won't go into too much depth other than to say overall, we did pretty well. As a group, we hit on 75% of our picks. You correctly noted the gap between the old and young members of the group. The older generation hit on 83%. The younger generation hit on 63%. If you had put $100 on every prediction made by everyone in this group, you would have plunked down $2,000 and you would have gotten $2,850 in return. So overall, not a bad showing when you average everybody together. I think, next year would be really interesting. I know what I'm going to do next year based on these predictions. I'm pretty sure I know what our listeners will do. So I don't want to make anybody feel bad, but yeah, overall it was fairly impressive.
Not bad. Okay. Let's move on to what's coming up in the world of sports. Obviously, we got to wrap up March Madness this weekend and Monday. What are you guys thinking? Who are the winners and losers? Nick, what do you think?
Let me take you through my picks. I've got 4-seeded UConn winning over Miami and covering. And then I've got 9-seeded FAU winning and covering, so it's outright over San Diego State. And then the title, UConn winning over FAU. A couple things to point out. UConn's had an average margin of victory of 20.5 points this tournament. Pretty tremendous. And I know I've got San Diego State losing in the semis, but they've held their opponents to an average points allowed 22.5 under their season average. So they'll offensively challenge, their defense has been pretty incredible. But that said, I've got UConn over FAU in the title.
Hey, Nick, do you have a score on that one?
Score on that one, let's go 73-65.
Okay, Bobby, what have you got for us?
Yeah, so first I will note I got 3 out of 4 of my against the spread picks correct over the initial weekend of college basketball. So not everyone in the young generation struggled. But as far as my picks for the Final Four here, I have San Diego State over Florida Atlantic and covering. I watched the Kansas State Florida Atlantic game. Kansas State had plenty of chances to win. They just didn't execute down the stretch. And I think Florida Atlantic's run is going to end this coming weekend. I have UConn over Miami. Not covering the spread, though. I think that's going to be a tight game. As Nick mentioned, UConn has been completely dominating every single team they've played so far. Miami's very talented and playing very well. I think this is going to be a great game. But I do have UConn getting by them. In the national championship game, I have UConn over San Diego State, 85-84 in a nail biter. Adama Sanogo, the big man down low for UConn. I have him putting up a double-double. He's been an absolute force the entire tournament. And I think he's going to be the one that takes UConn over the top. So it should be a lot of fun. It's, as has been mentioned earlier, it's not kind of matchups you would expect. Really no blue bloods other than maybe UConn, you could consider one. But I think there could be some competitive games. However, on the women's side, I think we may actually have the best game coming up here with undefeated South Carolina against Iowa and Caitlin Clark, who's, I think, the most dominant player in college basketball right now, men or women. So good college basketball action coming up on both sides of the aisle.
Okay. Charlie, what do you got?
Good call on Caitlin Clark. I think she put up 41 as part of a triple-double over the weekend. Unbelievable. And boy, her range from 3-point land is unmatched on the guys' side. That said, I've got UConn covering against Miami, San Diego State covering against FAU, and UConn winning the finals 71-62 over San Diego State.
Okay. Benny, what have you got?
Almost identical picks as Charlie. He must have copied off me, I think. But I have in the final, I have UConn over San Diego State 68-58.
And Bob?
I too am going with UConn to win this. I see them beating San Diego State by 10, say 73-63 in the final. UConn is not just the hottest team. They're the best team. They've got the best system. They play offense and defense really well. Excellent chemistry, excellent coaching, lots of momentum. I don't think they're going to be seriously challenged.
Well, I think you guys are wrong. I think in the UConn-Miami matchup, money beats coaching. Miami takes down UConn in an upset. On the flip side, I see Florida Atlantic is going to knock out San Diego State. So you're going to come in in a final with Florida Atlantic and Miami. And Miami's already going to think they've won the national championship by beating UConn. And in a monumental upset in the Florida rivalry, FAU is going to knock out Miami 73-72. It'll be a very memorable finish.
That'll be a memorable call if it comes true, John.
It'll be fun. Yeah, you gotta dare to be great on some of these, right? This is the way this tournament has been. Okay. So, in terms of other little sports tidbits and updates, everybody was going to share something this week. Bob, let's stick with you.
Just one unfortunate note. Dartmouth football coach Buddy Tevens, one of the more forward-looking guys in college football, had a serious bicycle accident in Florida a week and a half ago. He's going to be sidelined probably for months. Naturally, that's a blow to the program. They'll keep rolling along. But it does raise questions about his future. He's been enormously successful and has brought Dartmouth football back from the ashes where it was about 20 years ago.
That's too bad. I remember meeting him. Really, really decent guy. Hopefully he gets healthy soon. For me, I saw a big one on the news wire today. The NFL has decided to allow players to wear the number 0 on their jerseys. That's a monumental decision. I wonder when 00 will become eligible as well. Nick, how about you? What do you got?
Sure, it's kind of a fun story came out. It was tournament related, but 5 years ago when Dusty May was hired as the FAU coach, upon returning to his hotel room, after seeing the facilities, he signed the job offer before going to visit. He broke down in front of his wife, fearing he made a horrible mistake. Bit of a turnaround in 5 years, so good for Dusty May to have made the right decision.
All right, good story. Benny, what you got?
Well, a few things. Kind of picking back off of what was mentioned earlier about the World Baseball Classic, I think there's a few stats to know, just because I think the argument has to be made at this point that America's pastime is now owned by Japan for the moment. World Baseball Classic, the U.S. top 14 pitchers did not play. And the top hitter, arguably Aaron Judge, also did not play. Just shows the lack of interest and sort of national pride in America's game. But Japan, on the other hand, had 60 million people watching the World Baseball Classic, and every single star Japanese player played in that game. So I think that's something to point out just about where baseball is headed, and hopefully the U.S. takes it more seriously next time. Other news, I think I have to mention NFL. Aaron Rodgers still maybe going to the Jets. That could make the Jets a playoff team. I would hope. We'll see. In terms of, I know we mentioned the Baltimore Colts moving to Indianapolis, or we could see the Baltimore Ravens quarterback, possibly Lamar Jackson, move to the Indianapolis Colts. Would not be shocked if the Colts are a front runner for a trade, because they are desperate for a quarterback. If you listen to the radio at Indianapolis, it's a sad state of affairs to hear them talk about their quarterback situation. So Lamar Jackson would be a huge, pickup for them. And they seem to me like the most desperate team right now to get a quarterback. So keep an eye on that.
Okay. Charlie, what are the odds that Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay?
1 in 10.
Think they'll work out Packers were going to trade with the Jets?
Something will get worked out. It seems like both sides. The Packers don't want him. The Jets do want him. At some point, they'll get it figured out. Wisconsin doesn't want him. Ever since he emerged from the darkness, it's just been determined that he's too strange for Wisconsin.
Yeah, he's a little out there. He's definitely left the fans here in the dark. We've all joined him in the darkness, I guess.
Yeah.
How about in terms of a little sports news or trivia? What do you have?
PGA Tour this last weekend, they featured the one match play event of the year, and where guys play individual matches and advance through a bracket, much like they would in the NCAA basketball tournament. As it currently stands, that one match play event will not be repeated again in future years, although this year it seemed to garner an especially high amount of interest. You had some really top players, namely Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy, both advanced to the semifinals. Had a couple upsets late in the tournament, ended up being won by Sam Burns. So I think, although another match play is currently not in the plans, I think fan interest is going to maybe dictate that it will reemerge a few years down the road.
Okay. All right, guys, about to wrap things up. Any quick notes or last notes you want to share before we go off the air?
Yeah, so noting the World Baseball Classic again, they really took advantage of that moment, I think, but between Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. The fact that they were teammates in the game came down to Ohtani versus Trout to end the game. It was a really cool moment that, as Benny alluded to, a lot of people in Japan saw, and some in the U.S. as well. I would hope that is a signal to the National Hockey League that people care about best on best international tournament. The National Hockey League has done a horrible job of this. They have not had a real best on best international tournament since 2014. One of the best, actually the best young star in the game right now, Connor McDavid, called out the NHL for this himself. He has never been able to play in a best on best tournament. And it really is a shame. I mean, some of the best moments in hockey history are from best on best international tournaments. You have the 87 Canada Cup, Gretzky to Lemieux to end it. You have the 1996 World Cup, the U.S. finally beating Canada. 2010 Golden Goal with Sidney Crosby in the Olympics. It's something, Gary Bettman brought the NHL to the Olympics initially in 98, but we haven't had anything, in the last decade plus. I've heard nothing from excuses from the league as to why they haven't been able to do it. They keep pushing stuff back, saying they're going to go to the Olympics and then they don't, going to have a World Cup and then it gets pushed back. So I really hope this is the message to the NHL that people care about this stuff. They want to watch it. And hopefully that will change.
How would the players feel about that?
The
Do
players
they want to
play.
participate?
Absolutely. There were, when the NHL was, they said they were going to go to the Olympics in South Korea in 2018. Then they pulled out, because IIHF, International Ice Hockey Federation, and the Olympic Committee, wouldn't pay insurance for the players. And that was their excuse to bail out. You had Alexander Ovechkin, who just said, I'm going to go. I'm going to go play. And his owner backed him up. He ultimately relented because it would essentially void his contract if he left the NHL to go play over there in the Olympics. But the players want to play in it so bad. Olympics obviously is a top tournament that they would want to go to, but even the World Cups, when it's true best on best, not the fake World Cup that they tried to have in 2016, with like North American young stars. People want to play for their actual country, and so yeah, they absolutely want to play, and so it's something the players have gotten really frustrated by.
So, question for you, Bob Senior. If you look at what went on with the baseball tournament here, it was pretty exciting finish. Fans were into it. It was really a great draw internationally for fan support. Look at the case Bobby just made for hockey in terms of what fans would like to see. Do you think that translates to the NBA? Would NBA players, mostly I'm talking about, I'll say American or NBA players born in the United States, would enough of the top players want to participate in something like that?
They might well, particularly if it drew further attention to them, added to their ability to market themselves and so on and so forth. The problem with basketball is that the United States is too dominant. Far too great a percentage of the best players are American. And while the international scene has certainly improved, there are European teams that on a given day can play with an NBA All-Star team. That's still the exception, not the rule. It would help, it would enhance such a competition if there was a little bit more parity. And this is the great thing that's happened for baseball, and this is the missed opportunity for hockey. I mean, you really have 6-8 legitimate contenders for the top spot. So that's a little bit tougher for baseball. We might see a little bit of international American-style football coming up in the future. There are more and more games being played in other countries, but it'll be a long time before there's enough homegrown talent anywhere else to seriously think about international competition. The closest thing we had was the recently an Ivy League All-Star team played the national team from Japan and won. And the Ivy team was a pickup team of seniors, basically, going to play the Japanese national team.
What do you make of that?
It's kind of an indicator of where the state of international football play is. Obviously, the Ivy League is not quite the top tier in American college football, but that's the level that a foreign national team finds itself at this point. There are not too many Ivy Leaguers, maybe 20 in the National Football League, but they are literally all over the place in the European League. So.
Okay. All right. That's going to wrap it up for this week. The next podcast, we talk a lot about the Masters, what's going on there. We'll see how our team here or Bauman members forecast the results of that particular tournament. It'll be very, very exciting. So that's how we see it. Tuesday, March 28th, 2023. Just another day in our multi-generation of sports. Thanks, everyone.